Well, thanks for joining us. Your announcement is on the eve of the virtual Chiefs Assembly. Why now to announce the decision?
Well, when you think about it in terms of timing, we've got about 6 to 7 months left before my term ends in July of 2021. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to make sure that I spent as much energy and time focusing on getting things done, completed, before the next 7 months are up. And things like Bill C-15, mm-hmm. the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, very important bill. Things like the policing, seen as an essential service legislation, which we still have to work on and get in place. Influencing the federal budget. There's just so many things that we need to get done. And I didn't want to be distracted by having to run a campaign. I'll have 7 years in as AFN National Chief. And we moved the yardsticks down the field, no question. But I didn't want to be distracted with running a campaign because that's a full-time job unto itself.
Yeah, absolutely. How satisfied are you that you've accomplished what you set out to do? For example, closing the gap was a frequent desire. How much of that gap has been closed?
Well, when you think about it, and I was asked the question early on, some of the things we could look at and say the yardsticks have moved. Mm-hmm. You think of the last 6 federal budgets, like when you tally up all the billions that have been set aside for First Nations people, it's $27 billion.
Wow.
That's 5 Kelowna Accords. And so that's advocacy work, that's lobbying, that's influencing the federal budgeting cycle. And those are key strategic investments in housing and water and infrastructure and broadband and education and healthcare. Mm-hmm. And we need to keep doing more investments because the gap is still not completely closed, but it's moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
I think of Bill C-91, the Languages Act, that's a huge victory about revitalization of our languages. C-92, child welfare, where First Nations law is paramount, recognized as paramount, so we can start focusing on prevention, not apprehension, for our child welfare system, because there's 40,000 children in care. So I think the yardstick has moved, but we still have some way to go yet.
Yeah. That government-sponsored UNDRIP bill may become law before you leave, but what else in there remains unfinished as you head into the last 7 months?
Well, we want to make sure there's adequate investments in the federal budgeting process, in the next federal budgeting cycle. We want to make sure that we're not forgotten with the COVID-19 pandemic, with the immunization and making sure there's proper PPE and adequate healthcare services and needs that should be met in the north and the south for our people. There's lots of work yet to do regarding policing as essential service. We got to make sure that the $1.5 billion that Minister Mark Miller talks about for closing the water gap is adequately put in place. Mm-hmm. It's a fundamental human right. So there's ongoing work, no question. So we've just got to be vigilant and maintain the pressure on the Crown, because these are federal Crown, federal fiduciary trust obligations, and we've got to hold them to make sure that we see results going forward.
What do you hope will be a priority for your successor?
Well, I'd hope the successor maintains the momentum that we built up and continues to build bridges and allies, not only with First Nations people, but people right across Canada. And, we've done an ANOS poll that showed that 67% of Canadians want to see the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples implemented. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of support. So continue to build on those key allies and key bridges with people across Canada. Because once you deal with First Nations issues, which are really Canada's issues, you help not only First Nations people.
Well, thanks for taking the time to share that with us. We've got lots of time to talk to you before you wrap up and move on from AFN. Thanks so much, Perry.